January 2001, and we're interviewing Dr. John Nimmo, who is a physician at the Eastern and then the Western, and who was registrar in the college from 1987 to 1994. Where were you born?
1940.
Where?
In Whitburn, West Lothian.
Right. And where did you go to school?
In Bathgate Academy.
Right the way through from a
No, junior school in Whitburn. And then we had the dreaded 11 plus, and the people who did best in 11 plus from all the little villages were sent to this one school who were crammed for university entrance.
That was Bathgate Academy.
Bathgate Academy.
And what was your primary school like?
It was okay, working class area, a lot of working class children. It was friendly, pleasant.
And it was a pit area, was it?
Oh yes, mining was the main industry at that time.
Yeah. And what effect did that have on the kids who you were?
Oh, lots and lots of them were just aiming to go into the mining industry, like their fathers and uncles. Yeah.
So they weren't hugely motivated?
No, a small cohort were, and they were the ones who tended to go to Bathgate Academy. Most of them came to university then.
Tell me about Bathgate Academy.
Founded by John Newlands, who made his money in the slave trade for the West Indies, for the children of Bathgate, but at that time, as I say, the children from all the neighbouring villages could compete for places there. So it did have a primary school for Bathgate children and a secondary school for the area, as it were. Good school.
And what were the teachers like?
Oh, like in any school, they varied. Some were absolutely dedicated and very good, and others were less good. But by and large, it was a good school for the 3 arts. You know, you tended to get your higher qualifications, your university qualifications. It didn't have, for instance, sports fields or swimming pools or anything of that nature. It was very much the sort of Scottish Presbyterian work ethic in that school.
And what subjects were you good at?
Oh, maths and science mainly. I guess wasn't so good at languages, although I got higher French to everyone's surprise. Maths and science and English I liked, because we had an aspiring English teacher basically.
And do you still retain that interest? Or?
Yes, and indeed we exchanged Christmas cards. He's still alive. We exchanged
Right.
We haven't seen him for a year or two, but we still exchange Christmas cards.
Right.
Yeah.
And
oh yes, and the love of books, but you've known that for something you now have shared for 30 odd years, this our love of books, yeah.
Was he, did you play games, or was there no facility to play games?
Well, they rented pitches, we played football and we played tennis. And we got swimming at the local public swimming pool once a week.
And were you remarkably good at these?
No, I wasn't nearly as good at football as I wanted to be, but unfortunately. And that lasted through university as well. I wasn't as good at university as I wanted to be either.
What position did you play?
Full back, usually. Nowadays it'd be called wing backs, I suppose. Full back. Mm.
Right. And did you play for the school team, or did
yes.
you?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And at what stage did you decide that you wanted to do medicine? Or did you decide you wanted to do medicine?
From the very start. I didn't ever want to do anything else. I know it's boring and maybe sad, but I had never any intention of any other career but a career in medicine.
Do you think this was a cunning plot by your parents, just to sort of, like my mum did and never told me?
I don't think so. No, I think my father wanted me to be a lawyer, my mother wanted me to be a minister, I think, but I'm disappointed in them both.
Right. And so when you thought about doing medicine, was Edinburgh your choice, or
yes.
did you think of elsewhere?
No.
And what influenced you in Edinburgh?
It's hard to say. It was the nearest. It had, at our schools, it had a great reputation as one of the world's great medical schools through history, and that was where I wanted to be.
Was the local GP from Edinburgh, or was he?
I think so.
Was that an influence on you?
Not really, no. Didn't see him very much. Our local GPs had a strange history, a lot of strange dynamics in the general practice and environment that we shouldn't probably pursue.
Right, but that was. So when did you come to university?
58.
58. Mm-hmm. Right, and did you do the botany, biology?
Yeah, we did biology at the King's Buildings and were taught by Michael Swan.
Right. What do you remember about Michael Swan?
Charismatic figure, charismatic teacher. Very inspiring. Lovely.
Were you taught by the ecologist, the deer man?
No,
What was his name?
it was a chap called Wilkinson who did some of the teaching, but Swan did a remarkable amount of the teaching for first year medical and dental students.
Yes.
He did a lot of it himself.
Extraordinary, wasn't it, from
Yeah.
an FRS to be teaching first year medical
Exactly,
students?
we couldn't believe it. He was wonderful. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Greatly enjoyed his lectures. His
Yes.
lectures were almost full.
And what about botany? Were you drawn to that?
No, it was just, I think I was among the first people who didn't have to go to the gardens and look at plants.
Is that right?
Yeah, we did it all up at King's Buildings in the zoology department.
And you weren't aware that you were breaking some great tradition?
Well, we'd heard that people had to go and look at leaves and things. We were quite pleased not to have to do that.
Yes. And what about chemistry?
Yes, I did chemistry, but it wasn't a professor who taught. I think Kendall was still there, I think, wasn't he? But it was one
Campbell?
of
Did Campbell?
Campbell, yes, Campbell taught. That's right. You're right. Campbell taught us. Very nice man. Yes, yes, he was good. He taught us chemistry.
And what about
Physics.
physics? That's it.
I thought physics was very badly taught, and I don't remember any of the teachers in the physics department at that time.
Didn't get Jack Dainty.
No. Or maybe, I don't know. Fortunately, I had done 6 years studies in additional mathematics and physics and that sort of thing, so a lot of it was rehearsing what I'd done in 6 years at school,
Yeah.
or it would have been difficult, I think. I think a lot of people found physics very difficult.
Did you live at home, or did
Yes, lived at home.
you travelled in?
Travelled in.
How did you find that?
You get used to it, don't you? I couldn't afford anything else. I lived
And
at
did you,
home.
for the whole of your
7 years. Mm.
you travelled in?
Yeah.
Right. And that did you find that cut you off from some things?
Oh yes, yes, of course it did. It curtailed my social life, of course, in Edinburgh. Maybe it meant I did a bit more work, of course, having been cut off from my social life in Edinburgh.
Right. And did you make friends in first year? I mean,
Oh
did you-
yes, oh yes, yes. Still friendly with some of the people I met in first year.
Right. And then you went into anatomy, physiology, and
Yeah,
biochemistry.
yeah.
Well, who do you remember from anatomy?
Professor Romanis. He did a great deal of teaching himself. I was very impressed with him. I think he was a great teacher. Greatly enjoyed learning from him. He's the one I remember best.
Did you remember and understand embryology?
No, I wasn't very good at embryology. I even bought special embryology books, but I wasn't very good at embryology, no.
Yeah.
No.
It was that awful thing of the plate, then once it folded you were lost, like
Absolutely.
origami or something.
Yes, that's right. That's right. But we all learned from Jimmy's plates, didn't we?
Yes.
The sort of Bible we used in second and third year at that time.
And who did you enjoy the dissection?
No, not particularly. No, formal makes my eyes nip. No,
Yeah.
I didn't enjoy this.
No. And who was on the table with you?
Well, Mike Griffiths, with whom I still work, of course, he's surgeon at the Western, going to retire soon. Grant Mooney, general practitioner in Kelso, he's going to retire soon too. We still keep in touch.
Right.
Gordon Adams, who was in practice out in Blackburn. It was a good crowd.
You make your lifelong friends there,
You
don't
do,
you?
yes, you do.
Yes. And then what about physiology? What do you remember about physiology?
Well, I enjoyed physiology. I did an honours year in physiology as an intercalated year. Whitridge was quite an exceptional man, obviously a very bright man. And I thought a very good department. But my own favourite was, of course, Reg Passmore. With him I spent quite some time, did some extra research with Reg, and then it was closely associated with him and Mary Pickford during honours year. Really,
Right.
really wonderful. Yeah.
And before we go back onto that, what about biochemistry? How did you enjoy that?
I struggled with biochemistry. Although we were taught by Ottaway, who had written the book, I struggled a bit with biochemistry. We got the exams and things, but I was never really completely at ease with it like I was with anatomy and physiology.
Why do you think that is? Do you think it's a teaching, or do you think that?
I don't know,
Do you
maybe
think
it's
it's
me.
one's inclination?
Maybe inclination. Yeah. I don't. It's difficult to account for that, but I just wasn't as comfortable with biochemistry as with the other two major subjects.
I think that was a general.
I think it was. Yeah.
Most people struggled with that, didn't
Yeah,
they?
I think so.
So then you did well in those exams, which was the merit of going on the train.
Well enough. Yes.
And what did you do? What drew you into physiology? I mean, was that the one that you thought?
Hedonism, I just really enjoyed physiology.
Yeah.
It made so much sense to me.
I mean, there's a very great tradition of people who did physiology, isn't there?
Yes.
Who've done extremely well.
Yes, a lot
subsequently.
of people did. Yes, yeah.
Well, who did you go with into physiology?
I mean, who were in the same year?
Yes.
Oh, Mike Steele, with whom I'm still friendly. Mike got the first that year. David Newell, who's in medical education, was in Australia, got the chair in Sheffield now.
Right.
Gene Smith, whom I had lunch with a few months ago. John Burke. Yes, I can remember them all. Photograph was there in the physiology department, of course.
Right, yes.
For a year or two.
And who did you work? So you went to physiology, and what did you do in physiology?
It was renal medicine, renal disease, physiology, and that kind of disappointed David Whitridge, I think, because he wanted everybody to do neurology, neurological sciences.
And you could choose the topic for the year, could you?
Yes, yes. And as I say, Reg Passmore and Mary Pickford were my sort of directors and tutors.
Why did you choose the renal disease? What made you rebel against Whitridge?
I wasn't really rebelling against Whitridge. It was some fascinating things happening in renal physiology at that time, with the counter-current exchange mechanism just been published, I'm sure you remember, in the original German. And a lot of interesting developments. Also, I saw the future in dialysis, which was just starting, some transplantation was also just being thought about at that time. We're talking about the early 60s, 61, 62. So I thought it was an exciting time in renal physiology and medicine. Yeah.
And Woodruff had just done the first non-Boston transplant.
Right. Yes, he did. And later I actually looked after Bobby Kerr, who was the first parent to a child he did.
Yes.
And my colleague John Monroe had looked after the twins from Leith, who were the first.
Yes, I was the houseman at the first.
Were you?
Yes. That's why none of us did surgery.
Yes.
Anyhow,
yes, I was houseman there too.
So at that time, now what was it that you got out of that year?
Well,
were there general lectures? Did they have lectures?
Yeah, we had a marvellous time. It was the most marvellous year because it was a small group. We had splendid lecturers. And Watson and Crick came to visit the department, and I'll never forget meeting them. They'd just been Nobel laureates. Oh, we had a tremendous year. The honours physiology, I wouldn't have missed it. Got lots out of the camaraderie off to the Bush Institute and getting to know the teachers in a much closer, more personal way than as an ordinary sort of undergraduate and medical undergraduate course. No, it was a marvellous year. And I grew older, more mature. Learned a lot. Critical.
One of the things that people say about the Scottish education system is that it's very prescribed.
Yes, that's true.
And this has enormous strengths, and I mean, its wisdom speaks for itself. But when people find themselves at university, it often is rather like banging against the door, then somebody opens it and you fly through and have to collect your thoughts. First year medicine was perhaps more divergent, and then you go to anatomy, which is just straight rote learning. How did you find physiology with a very Scottish traditional learning behind you?
I enjoyed it. A lot of it was logic, and a lot of it was clearly rubbish, which is still things that had to be ironed out and sorted out. We were taught, for instance, the transport of free water, which is clearly biochemically impossible. There was a lot to be worked out. It was fascinating to look back at the history of physiology, the earlier experiments that had been done. It's marvellous. And we got started doing intracellular pH recordings and things. It was an exciting time.
Yes.
Very exciting time.
Tell me about Reg Passmore. What was your vision of him?
Oh, he was a marvellous man, wasn't he?
Yes.
He came over as almost unassuming, and it would have been very easy, I think, to underestimate Reg Passmore's intellect and ability. I think he was a marvellous man, great tutor, and we remained firm friends until very shortly before his death.
Yes.
We still met from time to time.
And then Mary Pickford.
Yes.
Yeah, tell me about Mary Pickford, because nobody that we've had has had that close contact. So
really?
Yes.
Oh, she was marvellous. Again, we kept in touch a bit, although the last time I had a meal with Mary was in the Great Hall when the Queen was here, and she and I were sat together at the table. We hadn't met for a little. It was great to renew old acquaintance. Oh, she was marvellous. And she was one of these teachers who took the students home to her house for a meal and for a coffee, and continued the tutorial type activity in her sitting room. I'd never met this before.
No.
She was a marvellous, warm, friendly person.
And what was so wonderful about her intellect? I mean,
I didn't know her intellect so well, Martin, in fact. It was her whole approach, her manner, her approachability, her way of dealing with people, with students, was just so marvellous.
yeah.
I wouldn't have known just how intellectual prof she was in physiological circles.
She was a bit domestic in her approach, wasn't she?
Yes, she was a bit, yeah.
Yes. Because it's interesting because so I didn't appreciate that Whitridge was half French, and that it was said that his keen intellect was due to this.
I didn't know that either. He certainly had a most impressive intellect, hadn't he?
Yes, and you sort of bounced, I think, but with Mary Pickford, you were not so exposed to it.
No.
So you did that year.
Yeah.
And that meant that you lost your year, didn't you?
Yes, it did. Mm-hmm.
So you have problems with which year reunion you go to?
Well, I get invited to both, which is nice. Although I haven't gone to the 64 reunion. Some friends from that year still invite me to join them at their reunion weekend.
And then you went back to... At what stage did you go back? Was it the transition term?
Well, we missed out most of that. We started honours physiology, so we missed out most of the teaching of the transition term. There was a transition term that time, quite at the third term of third year, but people who were going to do honours were taken away.
So how did you cope with that? Because that was a very significant term, wasn't it?
Yes.
I mean, that was where you learnt to take the pulse, to percuss.
Yeah, that's right. It was a wee bit difficult, which is perhaps one of the reasons I spend so much time in my teaching now at the students who come from laboratory disciplines and are suddenly thrown into the situation where they have to ask perfect strangers the most intimate details of their lives. It's a completely different discipline. And I spend a lot of time with the young students, going over that with them. I guess I did find it slightly difficult at first. But, the teaching was tremendous, not just from the consultants, but from the junior staff such as yourself.
But when you went into clinical medicine, it was a sort of mix, wasn't
Yes.
it? It was a mix of pharmacology and bacteriology and pathology, and then the clinical stuff. The last sort of the so-called scientific, the scientific ones were those bacteriology. Did you warm to bacteriology?
No, not particularly. I warmed to pathology, but again, it was because the teachers were so good, I thought.
Who taught you in there?
Black, Professor Black.
Right.
Who was tremendous. Inspiration.
Was he?
Yes, he was. I think Edinburgh's had a long tradition of having excellent professors of pathology.
Yes.
He's, the more recent Professor Balls, I mean, very distinguished and very likeable men.
Yes.
Which is, to some of us, quite important too.
Yes. And what about pharmacology? Who taught you there?
Perry.
Really?
Oh yes, I had a good time. I was at university and I had a wonderful time in Edinburgh Medical School. Walter Perry taught us a lot of our...
Now, what was he like? Because we were Gaddam, and so Gaddam was a receptor man and who taught us in slippers.
Yes, I'd heard of him. I didn't ever actually encounter him.
Yeah.
Perry was marvellous. He was warm, friendly. He was a sort of teacher who you thought might almost invite the entire class to come around for a pint after his 1 hour lecture. He was warm and friendly in that way. Marvellous teacher.
Because his slant was said to be not controlled trials, but it was standards, if you like. Yeah. Whereas Gaddam was sort of the receptor and everything emanated from that.
Yes.
So
I can see that. The only criticism I would have of pharmacology teaching at that time was precious little mention of clinical pharmacology, of drugs in humans. We've got a lot about drugs in animals, but almost no mention of what drugs did to humans. So one lecture on that, I think.
Yes.
Which, even for early 60s, was probably a mistake. I think we should have been maybe a little bit more on human pharmacology. But it was Walter Perry, marvellous teacher, marvellous man. Yeah.
And did you get Martha vogued, or had she already retired?
She'd retired.
Right. And then, at the same time, you were going into this totally new life of clinical work.
Yeah.
Who did you start off with?
Murray Lyon, 29 to 30, yeah.
Oh,
Gosh, I'd forgotten that. I had to think there. Murray Lyon, yes,
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And how was that?
That was a difficult term because, as you know, it was a transitional term. That was okay, but the junior staff did some marvellous teaching, I remember. And some of the people who taught me at about that time are still friends. You know, Drew Armstrong down in Dumfries,
Yeah.
Colin Galloway who did paediatrics up in Inverness. These were the people I remember as being the people who really helped in getting me into a clinical groove.
Tell me about
And then, of course, I came into the 23, 24 family scene, didn't I?
Yes. Tell me about Drew Armstrong. What was he like?
Marvellous man. Very, very fond of Drew. And as I say, we remained very good friends even after he went to Dumfries. We met them quite often. We had friends in Dumfries. We met them quite often.
He was very Scottish, wasn't
Yes.
he? He was
Yes.
very, and very controlled and very warm.
Yeah.
And wonderful intellect, hadn't
Yes,
he?
yes. And a wonderful manner. Wonderful manner.
Yes.
When you met him, you thought, gosh, what a nice man.
What a grown-up, yes.
What a nice man.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
And what do you remember of Murray Lyon?
He was a little bit remote, but he was must have been almost due to retire then. He was a wee bit remote. I don't think he enjoyed particularly good health.
No.
And he was a bit remote. I didn't get to know him. I couldn't say I knew him.
Yes, he began to get emphysema.
Yes, he had respiratory problems at that time.
And, yes, wonderful man.
I never really got to know him as well as you'd have
I was
liked.
his houseman, SHO and registrar, so
Yes,
I
yes.
So then, and who did you go and start off your surgical?
Oh, isn't that what we were got in 15 and 16? It was G.R. Cameron, Donald McIntosh. I'm still friends with some of the people who were there. Mike Henderson was the SR there at that time. I was round at Mike's house just a few months ago in Dumfries. Yeah, I remember
He keeps
that.
bees, doesn't he? Or used to.
Yeah. Oh no, that was a superb firm to be on.
What was Cameron like?
At that time, he too was starting to get a wee bit elderly and relied very heavily on his junior staff. He still had the reputation for thyroid surgery. It was austere, firm. So something's wrong with infirmary consultant sort of chap, you know, with the steely grey hair and the slightly imperious manner.
Yes. And Donald Mike?
Marvellous.
Yes.
Yeah.
What do you remember about him?
Oh, he was just the surgeon's surgeon, wasn't he? He and Thomas Wilson went through the press as being the surgeons. They were marvellous,
Yes.
technically.
Did
Great
they ever
surgeons.
tempt you to think about surgery?
You're going to lead me into a difficult one here. No, I think 6 months this pre-registration house officer with Professor Sir Michael was enough to convince him that my career should be in the medical
The
rather than surgical
non-knock
side.
times
Yes.
discipline.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then, I don't remember anything about obstetrics. Do you remember anything about obstetrics?
Not very much. Again, I remember the people who taught me who were the sort of senior of the junior staff, if you like, Melville Kerr,
Yes.
Martin Lees, the late Jim Robertson, I can't remember his Christian name. People like that, they were the ones who taught us what obs and Jeremy Livingston, they were the people who
Yes.
taught me what obs and gynae actually knew, which wasn't a lot. It wasn't a lot.
Enough to get
Very
through
good
the
at it.
exam.
Enough to get through the exam,
Yes.
get the certificate, yes.
Which other medical firms were you on in as an undergraduate?
Oh, I was in 2831 as well, wasn't I? At one stage. And that was before Sir John Croom came down to be chief there. When I was in 2324, it was Ronnie Girdwood, John Halliday Croom and Henry Matthew who were there.
Now that was a wonderful trio,
It was a wonderful time. As I talked about, a marvellous time as an undergraduate. I had some superb experiences.
Yes. What do you remember about 23 and 24? Was
Family. 2324 was family.
Total
Wasn't it?
family, wasn't
Total
it?
family. Well, like family, we sometimes had differences, but right from the boss, right from Ronnie Girdwood himself, who had a great way of keeping the family together, right down through, you remember them, Alec Delapiani, David Shearman, you, Neil,
Yes.
myself, and then on to Mike Spark, and then Brian McClellan coming after us.
Yes.
It was family, wasn't it?
Yes.
It was a marvellous place to work.
Yes, it wasn't like, I mean, it had no feeling of work about it, did it?
No, it really was a tremendous family atmosphere.
Yes. And yet we went through some extraordinary experiences.
Yes, yes, we did.
So you qualified.
Yeah, 65.
And who did you do your house jobs with?
Professor Sir Michael Woodruff in 1314 with Thomas Wilson, Alan Dean, who had just arrived.
Right.
So 6 months there.
Tell me about that. What was life with...
Well, there were three such totally different people, weren't they? Fortunately or unfortunately, Sir Michael was often on a Antipodean tour for about my first 2 months of my house job. But after that, he, actually I have to say, for reasons that aren't perfectly clear, he took a liking to me. And on every waiting day, which was a Monday, the first appendix was mine. And I had to phone him, and he came over and assisted me. And so on a Monday morning, I had to phone the Wilkie Research Laboratory, that you remember, and say, I'm sure Professor Woodruff, it wasn't Sir Michael then, he was far too busy to come over. No, and he came over. And several Mondays in succession, I took out an appendix, assisted by who was known as Professor Sir Michael Woodruff.
You're a very lucky man, because usually people never got below the skin, did they? They asked what the next layer were, and when you said gristle, he didn't seem to like it.
No, I'm not exactly sure why he did this, but he...
Perhaps he saw his only surgeon that he would do.
And of course, Thomas was absolutely marvellous, wasn't he? Thomas was just
Yes.
sort of everybody's man, wasn't he?
Yes.
I was fortunate to look after Thomas some years after he'd retired. And of course, Thomas's daughter was in my year, Sheila.
Right.
So I'd known Thomas a bit anyway. He was a very inspirational man.
Well, apart from being a wonderful surgeon, he was a kind, gentle
Yes, he was.
man, wasn't
Yes,
he?
yes, he was.
Yes, who would sit with people, or at
Yes.
least he wouldn't.
Yes.
It wasn't an end of the bedder.
No.
No. And he used to like to try his Gaelic and his
Yes.
Urdu or Hindi, I'm not sure which one it was, or perhaps he didn't. But
Yes, he was marvellous.
so you survived that.
Yeah.
And did that resolve in your mind whether you were going to be a surgeon
Yes.
or not?
Yes, it did. Because believe it or not, until that time I had a fairly open mind. But yes, that certainly firmed it up for me.
Why did it? What was it that...
It was sometimes the futility. Professor Woodruff attempted difficult vascular surgery, and to go into theatre at 8 or 9 in the morning, and about 9 or 10 p.m. finally decided that there wasn't anything he could do anyway. That was soul destroying. A lot of it was exciting. The renal transplant side of it was very, very exciting. A lot of it was exciting, but the vascular surgery I didn't particularly enjoy. It was a long time to hold on to a retractor.
Yeah, that was a very distressing
Yeah.
experience, and a little high on adrenaline, wasn't it?
Yeah.
At times.
Oh, in good times as well. Good times as well.
And then you went to your medical job, and where was that?
That was in 23, 24.
Right, tell us about that.
Well, that's when I joined the family, isn't it?
Yes.
That was marvellous. The first morning, busying about trying to be an impressive resident, and sister on 23, Pat Ogilvie, said, John, I think you should have some coffee. And I said, I'm far too busy. And then 10 minutes later, John, I really think you should have some coffee. And I said, far too busy. And 10 minutes later, she took me with the scruff of the neck, marched me into her office, sat me down and put a cup of coffee in my hand. And we got on very well. She married John Calvert after that, remember?
Yes.
And they were in practice.
That she was the tall girl, wasn't
Yeah,
she?
yes. And of course Liz Shaw was upstairs. And Liz has also remained friends since then with the
Ever
family.
since.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me about Liz.
A marvellous lady. I was privileged to work with her, not only when she was sister in 23, but she did come as our nursing officer to the Eastern for some years, and it was marvellous. We just brought family to the Eastern, basically, the whole hospital.
Yes.
It was marvellous atmosphere.
Yes, because there were a lot of social occasions, and in fact the day was a social occasion, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yes.
And meeting in her office for tea and sandwiches. Mm-hmm.
Yes. It was, and then what did you do after?
I went to the renal unit. I still had this hankering after renal medicine, and I went to work with Jim Robson's Essex Home for a year from 66 to 67.
Now that was
We were just-
very exciting.
Oh, it was exciting. We just started nocturnal dialysis, and it was exciting. It was sharp-end stuff with some alarming days and nights.
Tell me about that. Tell me what you remember about those days.
Well, the funniest one was we rigged up a new system. It was Jim Petrie and Tony Martin and myself had rigged up a system of draining the dialysis And unfortunately, someone had moved a bed and the wheel had gone in the drain, which meant the whole thing had built a back pressure. So these three poor people who'd been dialysed were sitting there with a great shower of dialysate coming down on top of their heads. One of them had an umbrella up, and they phoned me. I lived in a flat in Newington at that time. I just got married, and I went in, and we managed to sort it out. A very strange scene. Very strange scene. But it was sad because we got to know some of the patients, and I got a bit soft, and that's why I stopped wanting to be a renal physician, because when patients ran out of radial arteries, basically they got diamorphine and a high protein diet in a corner bed, and I didn't like that. And also some of the youngsters, there was a wee boy from Whitburn, I remember well, he was called Douglas Allen, and I had to beg, borrow and steal beds all over the hospital to do a peritoneal dialysis, and you probably even remember it. Liz Shaw was very good at it, and he died, and it got too emotionally traumatic, I thought, in nephrology at that time. The transplant program wasn't really properly underway by that time. It was being set up, and people were working very hard at setting it up, but it wasn't properly underway at that time. It was very much the sharp end stuff.
So that the principal way of treatment was by dialysis.
Yeah.
Was there intraperitoneal dialysis?
It was usually as a sort of stopgap until patients could find a space on the hemodialysis program,
right,
basically.
And what was the relative merits of peritoneal dialysis and standard arterial dialysis?
They found peritoneal dialysis painful, and they'd go on for about 24 hours, having about 1.5 litres to 2 litres of fluid infused, and then drained out after an hour, and it went on for 24 hours. They were tied to a bed for that time. Hemodialysis was over more quickly, and once we started to get the hang of preventing disequilibration, which we hadn't understood earlier on, it was much more effective.
When you mean disequilibration, what do you mean by that?
They changed in their osmotic pressure in their blood, and it hadn't changed in their CSF, so they got terrible headaches. Right. But we answered that putting a lot of glucose in the last bath. We got better at it over the year, but it was too dramatic. We had a hemodialysis went wrong one night, and it was Jim Petrie and Tony Martin were there, and obviously something had clotted somewhere where it shouldn't have. And Jim grabbed what he thought were a pair of artery forceps to clamp off a line, and were actually a pair of scissors. And I spat off blood went all over everybody. I think it was Tony Martin's anniversary. He was all dressed to go out. Another image from those days, and that was in Ward 21.
Where did that lie in relation to the hepatitis outbreak?
It was during that.
You were there?
I was there during that time.
Tell me about that.
Well, I got bitten by a little girl who had hepatitis B at that time. She was only 8 and didn't want me to take blood from her. But some years later I was invited to her 21st birthday, which was nice. We knew the people. We knew the people who died and the people who got the disease. A
lot of people died. Now, what do you remember about it? How did you first appreciate?
Sandy Rayburn phoned me. I can't remember about what, and said he was in the hospital and wanted some help. And it was our surgical colleague who had a few weeks earlier taken a cyst off my back from me. I was quite friendly with him. And our surgical colleague was having plasmapheresis at that time. I think Sandy was the first one to tell me.
That hepatitis?
That hepatitis B affecting staff from the renal unit. Yeah.
Right. And that was the first time that people began to be aware of the...
Yeah, of the passage of it through patients and machines, yeah.
And how many staff died?
One surgeon, one nurse was at death's door, and one technician, I think. It wasn't all that many, but a few people got it.
And there was a locum, wasn't there?
Yeah.
That Greek
lad,
and then there was John Clark.
And John Clark, I was going to mention his name, yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a dear friend, wasn't he?
Yes,
he was mine.
Yeah. He was in 13 and 14 when I was a student there.
Yeah, he was my co-resident with
right.
Woody.
Yeah, that's right.
Now, what was the effect on the staff during that time?
Well, we all worked together, and Jim Robson did run a very good team.
Yes.
With an able assistant and Lambie. They ran a good team. We all worked together. We worried a bit about it. We all checked our contract over carefully in the mirror every morning. We're a lot more careful than we perhaps had formerly been. We worried together, but we stuck together and still worked at it, and no patients were refused treatment. a self-conducted CPR and mouth-to-mouth resuscitation on someone who subsequently died.
Yeah. And because Jim Robson ran a different ship to Ronnie Girdwood, didn't
Oh yes,
he?
oh yes. Yeah.
What was the difference?
Oh, Jim was an autocrat, wasn't he?
Yes.
It was, everything had been done exactly his way, and there couldn't be another way of doing it. Perhaps in the position he found himself, it had to be like that. When he was setting up this evidence, but there's no such specialty as renal medicine, and indeed there wasn't. So maybe Jim had to be a bit bombastic to get his way and establish what turned out to be a very good renal unit, by and large due to his effort and his work. And I think maybe he had to be because of the challenges of the situation in which he found himself.
Yes. Because there was this remarkable thing, wasn't there, of Anne Lambie, who was such a lovely woman, who would describe all the literature since the Genesis.
Yes, she was
and then she'd go through all this thing, and then Jim Robson would say, two drops of potassium or whatever it was, and that was it, no more discussion.
Yeah.
And was it that I mean, there was that extraordinary situation, wasn't there, where the ward sister went up to the city where there was a hepatitis positive patient spraying blood all around the room.
I didn't know that.
And went in there and, just took down or closed it off.
Mm-hmm.
Which always struck me as one of the bravest things that one knew of, and she was quite a brave woman.
She was a very brave woman, yes.
Yes.
And she too got a very good team of nurses. I remember the quality of the nursing staff were fantastic in that unit. They could do dialysis and look after patients and do all the technical things as well as all the kind things you expect nurses to do.
And very gentle, dear friends.
Yes.
Did you go to the case presentations? Did they still have? Yes, it did.
The Wednesday afternoon jobs, wasn't it?
I remember it was Wednesday, in the morning after waiting day, and there would be Ronnie Girdwood, Jim Robson and Henry Matthew waiting to eat one.
No, it stopped that sadistic activity by the time I came along.
Yes.
No.
Oh, well, you were spared that. That was quite exciting.
Yeah.
You'd been up all night, and then Henry Matthew would have a go at you.
Yeah.
Not at you, but at me.
No, I was spared that.
When did you set the membership?
Well, after the renal unit. That was difficult. It's still the same today that people who do SHO posts where they don't have house officers take longer to get the exam. So during the renal year, I didn't really have much time to study, so I went down to work with Sir John Halliday Croom, 2831 for a year, and that's when I did my studying and got membership at the end of that year.
Now, what was it like going there?
That was marvellous. That was absolutely marvellous. Again, there were three totally contrasting consultants in the unit at that time. There was Sir John Halliday Croom, but he was only Dr. John Halliday Croom at that time, and Michael Oliver was there with his cardiological interest, and Clifford Maudsley was there, an extraordinary neurologist.
Yes.
And so it was a marvellous place to work and learn for the membership examination. It was marvellous.
Yes.
An opportunity to work with these people.
Tell me about John Croom as a clinician.
A kind man who could see the wood from the trees, very gentle with the patients. He knew when to defer to other authorities, but his patients got a very good deal.
Yes. Did you model yourself on him? You
model yourself on lots of people, don't you? I've thought about this often in my career. Who am I modelled on? Because obviously one hopes that the junior staff and maybe the students will model themselves a bit on oneself. A lot of influences, but Sir John has certainly got an influence on me, yes. And also, perhaps in a way that I try, he and Henry Matthew had this way of involving and making the junior staff feel involved in clinical decisions. Yeah. And so John Croom did it, Henry Matthew did it. I tried to do that, get the junior staff involved.
Henry Matthew had a touch of dogmatism that John Croom didn't,
yes, he? Indeed, yes. Yes. And he had that one irritating habit of going to see the patients with his team and then saying, we'll come back, and then went out and discussed the patient in the patient's absence, went back to say, in that few minutes was agony for the patient. I don't do it that way. I resolved that with one bit of Henry that I wouldn't take away. I don't leave the patient to worry about it.
And he would have been horrified to think that it was painful, wouldn't he?
Yes, I'm sure he would. Yes, because he was kind too. Yes, he would have been, but I'm sure you saw patients all wide-eyed waiting for them to come back.
Yes,
At that time, Henry had a superb team. He had Lex Lawson as his registrar at that time, another old friend of ours.
Yes.
And Andrew Fraser was his SHO, Andrew went into bacteriology.
Yeah.
So I had a good team, but I didn't like his style. But I liked all of his style apart from that one aspect I mentioned.
Yes. And then you came back to 23 and 24.
I did, yes. Uh-huh.
Were you there were we together for the rest of time?
Then you went to the Western, and then I came and joined you there as well.
Yes.
You've had to put up with it quite a few times. Yes, I went there in, it'd be 68, wouldn't it? 1st of October, 1968 it would be.
I mean, we had a lot of adventures together, right? The Marty, do you remember Marty?
Can I call you Marty? But was that the same lady who took exception to this little boy who'd come in to see her? And it was Neil, who was the sort of junior lecturer at John. She couldn't take to this young chap who'd come to pester her with things.
This was the lady the American lady who'd come across to the tattoo and took an aspirin before going there and had a bleed.
Yeah.
And yes,
I remember.
And then, what else? What did you gain? What did you do? Did you have a specialty during that period, or what did you decide?
Well, yeah, I started to get a training in GI with Neil and David, and also in clinical pharmacology with Lord Prescott. And my interest at that time was in drugs and the GI tract. And if you think back again, I was very lucky. It was a most marvellous time to be interested in drugs in the GI tract, because we were on the verge of having H2 receptor antagonists, weren't we?
Yes.
At that time, we're talking about very late 60s now. So lots of... and an increasing awareness of the importance of drugs, and not only what drugs did to the GI tract, but vice versa, how the GI tract handled drugs. And we were learning things about first-pass effect and the importance of gastric emptying and drug absorption. It's a marvellous time to be involved. And I tried, in my research, I tried to be in between or combine clinical pharmacology with clinical gastroenterology, and enjoyed that.
Did you? And this is really where your physiology must have paid.
That's right. Yes.
Vast dividends.
Yeah.
Did you keep contact with physiology, or did you?
Yes. Oh, yes. A number of us went on to be demonstrators. I'm sure you remember helping undergraduates in the laboratory, sort of one afternoon a week, and that was great fun.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, what did you do with Laurie? First of all, what was Laurie Prescott like to work with?
Laurie's another chap whose intellect is very impressive. And what impressed with Laurie is he could look at molecules and know what they would do. I've never been able to do that. In terms of his knowledge of clinical pharmacology, it's absolutely marvellous. I would have said his clinical practice wasn't his strongest point, but his research and academic work certainly were enormously impressive. And I don't need to say any more. He's the man who discovered how to cure paracetamol poisoning, for goodness sake.
Yes.
And I'm not at all surprised he managed that. He was of that calibre. His research and academic work were certainly of that calibre.
Right.
It didn't surprise me. He and I started some work on paracetamol poisoning, but it was a blind alley at that time.
Yes.
He was marvellous and stimulating in terms of research and academic achievement and getting papers written, that sort of thing.
And you looked at drug absorption and gastric emptying and the like?
Yeah, that kind of thing. And we looked at some hepatotoxicity and various aspects of drugs in the GI tract.
Were you a registrar or a lecturer?
Lecturer,
yes.
Yeah.
And then you learnt endoscopy, did you, at that time?
No, I learned endoscopy from Bill Circus in 73.
Right. Because, Bill, if I remember correctly, the start of endoscopy in the Royal was not, if you like, an explosion of enlightenment, was it?
No, it was somewhat less than that. But nevertheless, it got started and it's now established over the period of, 30 years. It's now established as a...
Because the problem was with those massive tubes that they presented us with that were heavy, wobbly.
Yes. And they were only unidirectional at one time, remember, that was all. You had to be quite a contortionist to get it to work.
Yes. So, you worked there, you did your waiting nights. What did you find waiting nights like in the Royal?
They were heavy. But my worst year was the year when I was with the John Halliday Croom, because only 3 of us, and so we were doing every third Friday, Saturday, and it was busy. We didn't spend much time in bed. And I'm sure you remember the next day we didn't get flayed by the consultant, but Ben Lasses gave us all a hard time the next day.
Was he your senior registrar?
He was senior registrar that time.
Tell us about Ben.
I like Ben. Most people didn't, it has to be said. I like Ben. I played squash with Ben. He was very unequivocal in his criticism of junior staff. He didn't show any warmth to junior staff. He was very almost abusive to them, and most of them didn't like it. Ben was a prickly sort of character in that way.
Was he with you when he died?
Yes. In fact, I had an appointment to play squash with him about the next day or something, because the police came and spoke to me about it, in case it was by his own hand, as it were, but I certainly could confirm that he had every intention of turning out to play squash with me the next day.
Yeah. You hadn't found that too daunting?
No.
Yeah. Tell us about your squash.
I suppose it's the game I was best at. I was never really, I didn't get a cap or anything, but I got quite a good standard. People coming to Edinburgh to play in international competitions would use me to warm up against, because they could beat me quite easily, and it wasn't too difficult. Squash was my favourite game. I was quite good at squash.
That's been understating. You're a very good squash player.
I was quite good at one time, yeah.
And where did you play? You played at the Edinburgh?
Everywhere. Played at the Staff Club, the Edinburgh Sports Club, Bellsmill, the University. Played everywhere.
Tell us about your game against the world champion.
I played 2 of them. There were 3 of them here, and I played against 2 of them.
The first one was when... Was that... Tell us about that. There was one that I remember you used to tell is when you were...
Yeah, well, he would stop...
Tell us his name.
Aftab Jawed, and he would stop... Aftab would stop and say, "John, from that position there were 7 possible shots, and that wasn't one of them." And then after a bit he just looked at me as I lay there and said, "I think he has no more tiger in his tank." That was the time of the SO adverts, remember, "Put a tiger in your tank." He was marvellous. Mohabullah Khan was a reasonably nice chap as well.
And what did they do to your game? What did they...
Oh, they taught. They were very, very good, very helpful. As I say, they would say, "From there's some shots you should play. That's not one of them."
Yes. Because it was at the time of that man Barrington?
Yeah, John Barrington was the British champion, but there were no Brits really getting anywhere in world squash. It was Australians and Pakistanis. These people from Pakistan are all from the same tiny wee area in Peshawar, all the Khans, Aftab Jawed, Mohabullah Khan, Kumar Zaman, they all came from one little area in Peshawar, and they dominated world squash for decades.
What do you think it was? I mean, I know that you can say eye-ball coordination, but what was it that was so devastating?
About them? Well, they could last forever. They didn't seem to get tired. They didn't seem to be perspiring the way other people were. And they had very good hand-eye ball coordination. They were very, very good players. They also were aggressive. They were quite aggressive on court, and a bad loser makes a good winner, as they say. And they were very bad losers, the Pakistani squash. Oh yes. I don't say that with disrespect. I say that with respect. They were very good squash players.
Yes. And what was a feature of their game? I mean, did they drop ball, or was it?
Oh, they were so precise, so accurate, and they moved so very quickly. They were good teachers.
And that was in contrast to Barrington, who just stood in the middle.
He was a workhorse. Yeah. He just worked. He was going to work his opponents off the court.
Yes.
Just keep rallies going, 30 or 40 shots until his opponents were too tired to be bothered chasing it.
Oh, which type were you?
Oh, that. I wasn't that. It wasn't a great flair player. Enjoyed it.
Yes.
Kept very fit, met a lot of nice people.
When do you still play?
No. I gave up competitive squash at 40 when I found I was playing people who were half my age, and I gave up altogether at 44. It was for orthopaedic reasons. It was just getting so painful after a game that everything hurt. So I gave it up. Miss it. Still miss it.
Do you?
Oh yes. I've still got a squash bag packed in my cupboard.
Yes. So you came through the lectureship, and then did you get honorary senior registrar status?
Yes, I got honorary senior registrar status, and when early 70s, 71, 72. Yes.
And then what happened?
Well, I came to work with you again.
Yes.
The lure of working with Martin was too strong, and I remember Jim McManus had gone to Canada for a year,
yes.
and his locum job came up at the Western, and applied for it more than hope than expectation, I have to say. I thought I was a wee bit junior for it, but I was very fortunate to be appointed. And again, I was very lucky because I had the most marvellous year there with the most marvellous physicians and surgeons. It was a different family, but it again created the sort of family atmosphere in which you and I had worked earlier in the Royal Infirmary.
It was a different family.
It was a different family, oh quite. But marvellous, and I learned an enormous amount from Bill Circus.
Tell me about what?
Bill is again one of the influences that, you know, as I said, you take bits of many people to form how you manage yourself. And I think the quickest diagnostic brains I have met were Bill Circus and Jim Robson. They were so quick to pick up diagnoses other people might have found less obvious.
Right.
Bill was again very knowledgeable in clinical gastroenterology, very, very knowledgeable.
Yeah.
And he had a nice way of imparting his wisdom, his knowledge, without making you feel a fool for having not known that before he told you, if you see what I mean. That was complicated, I'm sorry.
No.
But he did that, not just for me, but he did that for general practitioners who would ask him things. Bill never sort of put them down in any sort of arrogant way at all. Bill could educate without making you feel silly for not having known that before he told you it.
Right.
I had a lot of time for him.
His ward rounds were very lasting in their effect on people, weren't they?
Yeah. I thought I've ended on a wee bit too long, because I don't think too well when my back's got sore. But I don't conduct my ward rounds in that way. My ward rounds are conducted in a different way. We have almost all of the decisions made before we go into the ward. We sit round and go through every patient, every problem. Some things, of course, you have to decide in the ward after you've listened to the heart sounds or examined the abdomen.
Yes.
By and large, we have a management plan made, and the actual ward round part of it is more a public relations exercise for the patient's sake.
Absolutely. It's interesting how the Henry Matthew influence takes one through, doesn't it?
Yes, that's right. It's very much, and I think it's appreciated
Yes.
I think by the patients and by the nursing staff.
Yes. Yes. And you learnt endoscopy?
Yes, from Bill.
From Bill.
Mm-hmm.
And what do you remember about that training?
Oh, he was a marvellous teacher, wasn't he? He was a very good artist, and I think it always disappointed me. I couldn't draw things as well as he could.
Yes.
But he taught me very well. And it was more difficult in those days because we didn't have the video screens and all the attachments we have now to it. It's very easy to train people in endoscopy now because they can watch what you're doing, then you can watch what they're doing. No, he taught me, but we did a lot. You know, we did 3 or 4 sessions a week, and very quickly I got, I thought, expert at doing endoscopy. And as you know, I still do an endoscopist once a week.
He was very constructive in how he taught one, wasn't it? In the subtleties and the use of the hand and the like.
Yes.
Did you learn colonoscopy from him? Or
Yes, a bit. I didn't do so many as that because I was just getting good at that. When I left, I was only at the Western and the GI unit for a year, as you remember.
Yes. And then Jim came back.
No, he didn't.
Did he not?
No. So after I was appointed to the Eastern, I'd taken up the post. The permanent senior lecturer I had just left as locum became available.
Right. That was a fraught time for a lot of people, wasn't it?
It was a fraught time for a lot, including myself, yeah. It was a very, very difficult decision as to whether to reapply for it. I was encouraged by some people to apply for it.
Yes.
But that's water under the bridge now.
You went to the Eastern.
Yep.
And what happened? How did you find that?
Oh, it was marvellous. Friendly, warm, everyone working for each other. No enmity, none of the bitchiness that you get in the bigger hospitals. We really did, it sounds like fairyland, but we really did all work so very well together.
Yes.
Surgeons, obstetricians, paediatricians and us physicians.
The physicians were?
John Monroe and Alec Proudfoot at that time.
Gosh, yes. And the surgeons were Mike Griffiths?
Oh no, Mike was down at Shortley Bridge. It was James Ross, President of the College, and John Cook.
Right.
At that time. And the obstetrician gynecologists were, well, John Loudon, of course, Jeremy Livingston, Walter Patterson. Yes. But they tended to have a tradition of appointing the youngest obstetrician to the Eastern, and then when there was a vacancy, he moved back to the Simpson or the Royal, and the new one again came to the Eastern. So we had a procession of very agreeable young obstetricians.
Yes.
And the late James Syme did the paediatrics.
Yes.
He was also a wonderful colleague to have done there.
Yes. You worked with John,
Mm-hmm.
or you in the same setup. How did you run that unit?
It was a democracy. We took a 3-year period of being car or boss, and we met once a week for lunch and thrashed out all the problems with the middle grade staff. Thrashed out all the problems for the unit. It was marvellous. We all had to say we ran it very well.
One of the things that I always remember about the Eastern was the good contact with GPs.
Oh yes.
Now, how was that developed?
Oh, in lots of ways. For a start size, it's smaller, and therefore you've got a more close working relationship with the GPs. We had monthly meetings where we did clinical presentations, got a drug company to provide a buffet, and we invited the GPs in and we presented cases, invited local experts to come, particularly newly appointed consultants to come and show off their expertise to the GPs. But in those days too, it doesn't happen so much now. GPs were anxious for us to do domiciliary visits with them. They would like us to go out and visit patients with them. If they were opening a new surgery, we were all invited to come along and celebrate it. And some of them became very close friends. Like Pat Gracie each year took myself and Message out for lunch and golf and this sort of thing. It was a very close relationship. Yeah. It still is. I still get all my referrals are Dear John or letter referrals.
And by face, you can envisage the person.
Oh yes.
Jim Ledingham was a
particularly close friend.
Yes. Yeah. And what was he? What was he like?
He was a dynamo, wasn't he? He was the most marvellous GP. He too had the knack of seeing things very, very early. Very early indeed. And if Jimmy sent a patient and said, Dear John, there's something wrong, I don't know what it is, you could be sure there was indeed something wrong. Worked very closely with Jimmy, very good friend, and actually we worked together football circles as well in Edinburgh.
He supported a different club to you, didn't he?
Well, we both did, you see. We both looked after Hibernian, but he was an Aberdeen man.
Oh, right.
My allegiance is somewhat west of that.
Always an elitist.
Yes.
How did you start? There was no. Am I right in saying there was little tradition of endoscopy?
Oh yes, there was virtually none. I think the surgeons had an old endoscope they used every now and again, but not very much. Just after I arrived there, we were trying to raise money, and the local round table had raised some money because they put on a charity football match, and one of the number had collapsed and died, and so they thought they'd give the money to a medical charity, and they asked me to come along and tell them how I would spend the money, and I said I would buy an endoscope and told them why. And so the first endoscope we had was bought by money from the Portobello Round Table Club. Right. And it just grew from there. I started off doing a session a week in the theatres, one of the theatres, anaesthetic rooms, and it's grown from that to we're doing 5 sessions a week, 10 patients a session, 50 endoscopies a week.
How did you do about training the nurses? Because it always struck me that whilst we were taught to handle the endoscopes, once how it was received and after you took it out wasn't one of one's obsessions.
No, it wasn't. Key Med have been very helpful in that. The company supplying them, they've been very helpful offering nurses training courses, and most of my staff nurses now have been in a 1-day course on maintenance of instruments and instrument care.
And did you do that at the beginning when you
went down? No, I taught the staff nurses. Theatre sisters let me have 2 theatre staff nurses, and I taught them.
Right.
Having learned at the Western how it was done.
There's a lot of tit for tat in that, isn't it? I remember doing my first thoracotomy with every part of the movement taught by a nurse who had been a theatre sister. Yes. So that got things settled. And how long did it remain as in equilibrium system at the Eastern?
Well, it grew because, as you remember, Alec left and went to the Royal Infirmary, and we appointed Roger Kellett, who came just shortly after I was there. And then as hospitals closed, we acquired more staff, and we acquired Mike Ford when Leith closed. Mike was a very valuable colleague. And then we expanded even further, had Alan Patrick in diabetes and Ron Ferguson in respiratory. So it wasn't just the Eastern, remember. We did cover the whole east side from Leith down to Woodlands and Hannington.
Did you go down there?
No, I go to Musselburgh, I go to Eton Hall Hospital. I still do 2 clinics a week there.
Right.
Have done since 74.
And when you first went there, was it a long stay hospital when you went?
Oh yes. And in fact, the national servicemen, or ex-soldiers, still had the right of abode there. We still had a number of old soldiers whose permanent postal address was Eton Hall Hospital.
Did you find, I mean, was that rather abstract medicine, or was it?
No, it was providing exactly the sort of care the community was needing. It was downstream beds. We didn't take anyone who was acutely ill there.
No.
But a lot of elderly people in the community were just needing a wee bit of rest, or tidy up their diuretics, or maybe a bit of antibiotic and chest physio, and a couple of weeks rest in hospital. It provided that sort of medicine for the community.
Because I remember, I forget who it was, when he went, it was before John Monroe went, I can't remember, it was the first consultant who'd been there ever when he went down to do a ward round, and the people were astonished.
Yeah. Well, John and I did ward rounds regularly, twice a week.
So
but as I say, it wasn't most acute medicine, it was a second line medicine.
Yeah. Now, one of the things that you are well known for, you're seen as the doctor's doctor.
Thank you, that has been said, thank you.
And, it's one of the things that you're widely admired for.
Thank you.
How did that come about, and how do you see it? How do you see looking after doctors?
I don't know how it came about. It happened, and doctors and their families are referred to, and I must look after them, and I'm flattered, and they get the same attention as every other patient gets, and people seem to be happy with that. But it's still, even the nurses, when they're ill, they get themselves referred to me. I'm very flattered by it. Looked after a lot of doctors and doctors' families over the years.
Do you find that difficult?
Only in that you know that the people you're speaking to are very well informed. and yes, I suppose it's a bit more demanding in that you're very anxious to get it absolutely right. Although you're anxious to do that every time anyway.
Yes. If you found looking after renal dialysis patients daunting, and people who you got to know well dying,
Yeah.
Does this carry over into medicine?
It would have done, wouldn't it? And I still remember people like Dick Stoddart, who was a patient of mine 30 years ago. The local golf club still play for Dick Stoddart Bowl because he was a member there. I can name many of the patients. I've got to know them. Most of them, sadly, are dead. Yeah. But it doesn't happen in gastroenterology. We make people better. Gastroenterology is a wonderful specialty. I've been very lucky in my life, Martin.
Yes.
Gastroenterology is a wonderful specialty. We actually make lots and lots of people better.
Yes.
The only people who would die in us would be with malignant disease, or occasionally a very bad inflammatory bowel disease, isn't it? The rest of the time we usually win.
Yes. Yes, that's right. Yes.
So we're very fortunate with our specialties.
Yes. Or perhaps we chose it because we...
well, yes.
Is that tea? Shall we stop for tea?
That'd be lovely, thank you. How's it going? You sort of been reasonably happy with it?
Oh, yes. The Eastern, in those halcyon days, had a great reputation for really first-rate clinical care.
Yes.
And then the start of the glorious reforms in the health service began. How did that affect? And also you had this wonderful sister in Liz Shaw, didn't you?
Yeah.
Before she went to become...
Back to the wrong firm.
Back to the wrong. Mm-hmm. When did you first begin to realise that the end was coming for the Eastern?
Well, I suppose a lot of us were ostriches, Martin. We thought they couldn't possibly do without us. We see the bed crisis, and at the Eastern we did cope with a lot of patients during the winter. Although the medical unit officially was only some 83 beds, at one particular winter we had 160 odd patients. We closed other wards. So we didn't believe it for a long time until the removal vans arrived just about. We believed that they would have to keep us open. Of course there were difficulties. A lot of the investigations had to be carried out at the Western, so we had elderly patients going in ambulances from the Eastern to the Western for CT scans. BQ scans. Not ideal. Not ideal. There were problems. We thought we compensated in many ways by the quality of our staff and by the industrious way in which they worked. You know. There's no doubt, but when I see how people work at the Western now, it's quite a contrast to the way the teams worked at Eastern.
You had teams which were a boss and
A middle grade staff and a house officer. And we worked very closely together for 2 months or 3 months, depending on the rotas we were using. And we spent about as much time with them as we did with our families, really. We went to outpatients together and ward rounds together. It was a very close team. And we had a series of close teams of that nature.
And then how were you told that the Eastern was going to close, and what happened after that?
Well, we knew they were planning that. It came through the area medical committee, and I was deputy for the late Nick Gordon on the area medical committee, so I got minutes and agendas, and it became quite clear that they were intent on saving some money by closing the Eastern.
And that was your first?
Yeah.
Right. So what happened after that?
Well, it really was handled in the most abysmal way, as you can imagine. You know, I was asked where I'd like to go, and I said the Royal, probably since I knew the Royal. They said, okay, and then they said, no, the Western. And I said, the Royal. And then I had a letter saying if I didn't go to the Western, I would be dismissed within 24 hours, having been a consultant for 34 years in the NHS. So I got the Western, and struggling, hopefully, to do a good job there. It's a bit difficult in that I've come in between general medicine and GI to an extent. I don't do as much GI as I should like at the Western, but I do a lot of general medicine.
Yeah. Do you have any contact with the GI unit?
Yes, I go to their X-ray meetings and their pathology meetings, and I have one clinic a week, on Tuesday morning, to see some new interview
with
patients.
GI?
Yeah.
Right. And how many? And you do general medicine?
The late Anne Ferguson was actually very helpful in the time of my move from the Eastern to the Western. She was very helpful and supportive. And the one card I got welcoming me to the Western was from Anne, in fact. She was very helpful and supportive.
Isn't that nice?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. She was very helpful.
And when did you first get involved in the college?
Oh, a long time ago. And that, again, you see, as I said, I've been lucky. I was a member just when we started to have a collegiate members committee. There was a new concept, a new idea, and I was lucky enough to be in office and be secretary, and then the chairman of the collegiate members committee during the very formative years when no one knew if it was going to work, if it would last, and what its precise role in the college would be. So that was exciting. So that was way back, just after I got membership, back about 69, 70, I guess.
And who was president at that time?
Well, at that time, as you remember, we were allowed to attend council meetings, but we weren't supposed to speak. But in actual fact, the presidents at the time were very enthusiastic about asking us for our points of view. We were actually encouraged to state our point of view. So the late Ronnie Robertson, John Crofton were the two I remember when I was a collegiate member on council.
Yes. It was quite a daunting experience.
Oh, it was a daunting experience for a young lad, yes.
Do you remember being in this room?
Yes.
And if you look at the carpet.
Yes, the council meetings took place in this room, yes.
Yes.
I remember.
And then what happened after that?
Well, I was on one or two committees. I was minute secretary on one of the appeal committees, the one that was chaired by Sir Derek Dunlop.
What was that like?
Oh, it was marvellous. He was such a marvellous man. I was very fond of Sir Derek.
Yes.
I'd known him for quite a long time through the Royal Medical Society and then the college. That was good, but I didn't like the professional fundraisers that the college were employing at that time. It just didn't take to them at all. But the appeal committee itself was great fun, and it was successful. And then one or two committees, the education committee and various committees, and both as a collegiate member, later as a fellow, and then became registrar, which was my next big commitment to the college.
Something I've missed, obviously, in your career, Royal Medical Society.
I wasn't an office bearer, just that I was the public business convener, so I had to write to people to get them to come and speak and take them for dinner and that sort of thing.
Oh, right.
Which I met a lot of interesting people that way, and so Derek was very supportive at that time.
Right. Did you enjoy the RMS?
Yes. Oh, yes. 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 That's where I was when President Kennedy was killed.
Oh, right.
Well, you see, everyone remembers where they were when President Kennedy was killed. I was in the Royal Medical Society.
So you were secretary?
No, public business
Yes.
convener.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, finish that. Come back to your college life now. And you've been in the education and then what was your first office bearer?
Well, it was a registrar.
Registrar.
After the collegiate member office, I was registrar.
Yes. And what did that work entail, and how did it change through the?
Well, it was a very exciting time to be registrar, because the membership examination itself was still growing and flourishing. But by that time, of course, we had the three colleges all joined together in the common Part 2 membership, which was good, because when I took the exam, I took the Edinburgh Part 1 and the common Part 2, which was rather strange. And we were involving other centres, enlarging the exam abroad to Kuwait, to Kuala Lumpur, a lot in Hong Kong. And then we had other exams that came along too that were interesting. The blood transfusion medicine exam came along. We're still working in the diploma in community child health. And then one that I particularly enjoyed, we got the diploma in sports medicine with the Scottish colleges, and that was tremendous, being involved in setting up that exam.
Yes. With
representatives from other college, chaired and convened by Peter Edmund, who's another old friend. So that was great. So yeah, very exciting being registrar. It was a lot of work. Because I still had quite a busy commitment at Eastern General Hospital, yes. So a lot of work was done in the evening.
And did you come into the college in the evening?
Yes.
Right.
At that time, initially, the examination office was just at the front door there, so it was easy. Towards the end of my period as registrar, I got shifted to the third floor, which was a little more difficult.
Yes. And when in the early days, what was the exam like when you took over? What was the format of the exam?
It's much the same as it is now, with the multiple choice Part 1 and the written paper Part 2 and the clinical part. It's about to change again now, as you know, but it very much as it is at the present time in this state. The examination was studied very carefully by our colleagues in Hong Kong, who were looking to see which route their postgraduates should take and which sort of examination they should have. And they studied, state boards, Australia, States, Canada, and they decided that MRCP UK was the best of the postgraduate medical exams, and they involved it in their training as well.
And what was it that they found good?
I think just the whole organisation, the whole spectrum, the way it was worked. They thought it was a fair test of their young doctors.
Right.
And I've taken the exam with great enthusiasm.
Yes. And what area did the exam cover when you were involved? I mean, what hospitals? I mean, was it?
Well, ever contracting, wasn't it? We used to run the exam in Eastern, Leith, Deaconess, Chalmers. All these hospitals used to take a turn at hosting the exam. So as the city hospitals closed, we had to move further afield, and got great support from Law Hospital, Monklands Hospital, Dundee, Aberdeen, and I believe now they're moving into the north of England, which was always opposed to when I was registrar. We weren't allowed to do that. So it's been difficult with closure of hospitals where there was a great deal of enthusiasm for the exam.
Did you have to go to the hospitals? Did you ever set foot in them, or did you?
Yes, I went to look at them. Oh yes.
Yes.
And I'd examined in many of them before I became registrar, of course.
Right.
So I knew most of them, the strengths and the weaknesses. Yeah.
And what do you think the exam examines?
Well, it's evolving, isn't it? And I sometimes have to stop and think about that to make sure that we are actually asking questions to which we think our young doctors should know the answers. We still put a lot of emphasis on eliciting clinical signs, but we know full well that you won't get a cardiologist to give a comment on heart sounds till they've seen the echo, which is the way it's going, isn't it? And you won't get a gastroenterologist to see if the liver's really enlarged until they see what the ultrasonic scan shows. So I think maybe we have to move more towards interpretation than the actual elicitation of clinical signs, which has not had its day, but certainly has been replaced in some ways by the easy access to investigation.
And that must be an enormous contrast then to GP. I mean, if you are assessing someone in practice, or assessing someone in A&E, or in casualty, or whatever it's called now, it must be, you still need to be able to hear murmurs, and you still need to be able to look in eyes and...
Oh, I'm sure you do, yes. Yes, I agree, but it's amazing how much access even in these areas they have to investigation now.
Right. I mean, how do you think that is going to progress? Do you think there's going to be a time when the patient goes through a scanner as they come through the door?
No, I think there's still a need for an individual to take a history and examine the patient. That's bound to continue, isn't it? But I think, access to investigation is getting easier.
Yeah. What do you think the effect of the exam was on, if history taking was critical to, I mean, if you remember when we were in 23 and 24 running the exam then, and people whose first language was not English.
They had difficulty.
Do you think that people sitting the exam were disadvantaged by language?
But, yes, they were, but if you examine in Hong Kong, the candidates are taking the history in usually Cantonese rather than Mandarin, and then they're telling the examiner the history in English. Now, if anyone's going to be disadvantaged, that must be a disadvantage, and yet they do very well, very good pass rates in Hong Kong.
Yes.
So, yeah, there might have been some disadvantage in not having English as a native tongue, but it can be overcome. And the Hong Kong people do very well.
Were you involved in the development of questions for the multiple choice?
Yes, I was on the Part 1 and Part 2 board. The registrar.
How did that progress?
Well, I was glad to be leaving, particularly the Part 2, both. I was glad to be leaving when I was, because I did think we were starting to ask questions to which I didn't think our young doctors necessarily need to have the answers. Gene loci and some of the molecular biology that was being asked. And I frankly didn't know, and I wasn't sure that I needed my junior staff to know things like that. All very good intellectual exercise, but not, I don't think, appropriate to what young doctors need to know and do.
What proportion of questions were on things that you and I might never have heard of?
Well, it was increasing, you see, which is why it was a good time to come off. There were more of them coming in that
yes.
The molecular biology was getting too difficult for me.
So when was that beginning to change? That was around about 1994 that
yes,
it was beginning to...
Yeah.
Right. How were the questions set up? Who generated these questions?
I was very impressed with the efficiency of the Part 1 and Part 2 board. They really are excellent, and an excellent learning experience to be on them, let me say. And they were chaired by a great people. Eric Beck spent a lot of time in the second part board. Questions are generated mainly by fellows who send them in, and they're analysed and dissected and put into a pool. And then before a board meeting, each member has 2 or 3 questions that he is specifically to look at and make sure he knows all about them, and then present them to the others, and only if they're approved by the board are they put into the pool to be used. And the papers are produced, of course, a year in advance. I was very impressed with the efficiency of the Part 1 and Part 2 board. It's just that I was out of step with the content.
Do you think that there is an imbalance between the, if you like, the academic and the NHS, and and included in that primarily are the district hospital doctors, and each of their giving of questions?
No, I don't think so. But I'm just a little bit worried the way it's moving. You see, would you regard yourself now as, or just before you tried it, expert at reading an MRI scan, for instance? Now, in the photographic part, they're showing scans, CT scans or MRI scans. Now, I recognise the big things, but if I have a problem, I go and ask a radiologist about that. Now, do we really want to ask our junior staff to be able to interpret difficult MRI scans? It's that sort of... And I don't think academic, non-academic is... I suppose if you work in a hospital where they don't have an MRI scanner, you might be disadvantaged. But that's the sort of way it's...
No, I mean the gene loci and things like that.
Yeah.
I mean, if you work at a district hospital like the Western, then it's unlikely that you'd come across a gene or a loci or both of them together, would you?
Yeah. Well, it's...
Or do they?
Well, yes, they do. Yeah.
Right.
They talk about, when you go to meetings, they talk about gene loci as if they were familiar things.
Because I remember when we were deciding who did general medicine take one distinguished professor asking us when we last saw a viral encephalitis. No, a herpes virus encephalitis, and that cleared a lot of the contention. Of course, the obvious question was, what did you do for it? Mm-hmm. But do you think that the original objectives of the exam are still being met?
I think so. I think it's still a mark of the person who has done a reasonable amount of general medical training and has a certain amount of knowledge and competence and also attitude. I mean, we're checking their knowledge, their skills and their attitude, aren't we? And I think to get the exam you've got to show that you have enough of all three of these. Yes, I think it does.
So when you were registrar, you were first of all involved in the setting up of the questions.
Yes. And
these, was your place as secretary there, just adding that to the pool and of questions?
No, I was just an ordinary foot soldier, a working member of the Part 1 and Part 2 board.
Yes.
So I just received my questions and went along and talked to them at each board meeting, the question, the strength, the weakness, any ambiguity, or any inaccuracy. Right. And of course the questions were all analysed for their performance too. We knew if the good students got these questions right and the bad students got them wrong. So
right.
It was very, very carefully.
And that was assessed all the time,
yes.
was it?
Yes.
Now, was the pool of questions kept constant?
No.
So it was an ever-expanding...
And well, not ever-expanding, but some questions were dropped too.
Right.
Questions that were perhaps out of date now were dropped too. You wouldn't ask questions on indications for elective surgery for peptic ulcer nowadays. No. There are some things which you just draw right out of the...
Right. And how could they be identified? How did people hand do it? Or
at the committee, it was agreed by the committee.
Right.
Or the person who was asked to review this question might say, I think this question is now past its sell-by date.
Right.
And if the committee all agreed, then that question was drawn from the pool.
So,
I was impressed that it was very carefully done, quite labour-intensive, but done with great care and caution.
And were the number of questions, though, slowly increasing?
Yes, I suppose they were slowly increasing, yeah.
And how were they selected, then, for the next diet of the exam?
Well, I think people like Eric Beck would select a lot of them.
They weren't selected mechanically or randomly?
No, not randomly, but they would be selected so that they covered a broad area. You wouldn't have 5 case histories all in a similar sort of specialty. No. Be selected so they cover different areas.
Right. So people would sit the first part, multiple choice,
yes.
And then there'd be another then that was the first part, was it?
That was the first part, yes.
And how many questions would there be?
I think that was 60.
A lot?
A lot,
Right.
And it's marked by machine.
Yes.
And then a line is drawn at the top third.
Third?
It was done competitively, yeah.
Right. So having got that, then people proceeded to the...
Part 2.
Part 2.
Written paper.
And what was how soon after the graduating would people sit there?
About 18 months.
18 months.
Yeah.
And part 2?
2 years after graduation.
So that would be a 6-month period almost between.
Yeah.
Do you think this puts an enormous... I mean, when you prepared for the membership, did you do it on your own or with a group?
Yes. Well, I did it mainly with a small group of Mike and Judith Steele and the late Brian Hawley, whom you remember as well.
Yes.
Very bright people. We'd spent one evening a week together going over potential questions and subjects. I read a lot of it on my own. And there weren't as many courses, and the college itself is very responsible now and sets up education for the membership examination.
Yeah.
There wasn't nearly as much of that in our day. But I think the question we're going to ask is, does that put a lot of pressure on? Yes, particularly with Kalman, the system in postgraduate medical education. Yeah. There's an awful lot of pressure now on the youngsters to get the membership within their 2-year SHO rotation. Yeah. Because they feel, and maybe they feel rightly, they're unlikely to get a good post after the 2-year SHO rotation unless they've got the exam. Yeah. So there's a lot of pressure on it.
Do you think the exam is as hard or is more difficult? Or do you think the same?
I think it's about the same.
Right. Do you think we would have got it now?
You and I would have struggled with the first part.
Yeah.
I think you and I would have got the clinical part of it now.
Yeah.
we might have struggled with the first part.
Once, then in the second part, what did people do? Did they? So this third went forward, and they.
Yes, well, they have the written paper where they have case interpretation. Well, they call them grey cases, where they're given a clinical scenario and they've answered questions on it. They have data interpretation, with just given some results, laboratory results, and they have to answer questions on it. And then they have pictures. That used to be projected material, but now they get photographs of clinical material and are asked questions. And that's where I get a little concerned about being asked to interpret X-rays, scans.
And these come as flat copies rather than transparencies?
Yes, that's right. They come as pictures on a page.
Right. Now, is that the first part of the exam?
That's the written part of the second. That's the written part of the second part. Yes.
Right.
And only if they do reasonably well in that do they proceed to the clinical part.
So in fact, it's
that's another filter.
Part 2 of the exam.
Yes, just about it, yeah.
And and how are the questions for that? Is that set up in exactly the same way as the Part 1 multiple choice?
Yes, Part 2 board does a similar sort of job, yeah.
Right.
Again, with great care and precision.
And
it takes 2 days
right.
every diet of the examination.
Right. And people send these in, and are people quite good, or do they have to be prodded?
I think they have to be prodded. But a lot of it's involved in altering or updating present questions, or questions that have done well before.
Right. And it's not, and then how many people progress from this exam, part of the exam, through to the clinical?
Well, this is the worry, because I think it's difficult now to accommodate them all, and I don't think it's fair on young people to let them take the written paper and then say you've passed the written paper, but unfortunately we can't offer you a clinical exam now because of no spaces.
And is that done by a mark rather than a third?
That's done by mark, yes, that's right. Yeah,
right.
That's done by mark. If they gain a certain mark, 9, they get to proceed. 10 is the pass mark. If they gain 9, they proceed to the clinical component of the examination.
Right. And the clinical component consists of what?
You'll remember it well. The long case, the short cases, and the viva.
Right.
And,
which is
the only difference from our time is that the short case is now half an hour rather than 20 minutes.
Right.
And they'd be expected to see 6 clinical signs.
Right.
It's just very similar to what happened to us.
Yes. So, I mean, it's a very grilling exam, isn't it?
Yes. Yes, it is.
How did
it's
you...
important, I think. It's an important exam.
Yes, massive. How did you ensure uniformity of standard in the clinical and viva part of the exam?
Well, you can't. You can't. You know, we have looked at hawk dove indexes, and people are told that hawks are doves, and the registrar can put a hawk with a dove in the viva or in the clinical part of the examination by knowing the people. But you can't absolutely guarantee uniform standard, I don't think.
Yeah. And the other one is the difficulty of the clinical science, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean,
but the good examiner, when preparing the exam with his registrar, will make it clear that you don't just need a range of subjects, but you need a range of difficulty. You've got to have a couple of really easy ones and maybe a couple of quite difficult ones, and then you can assess a candidate much better than if everything's very easy or everything's very difficult.
Yes, yes. In your time, did they have the enrolment ceremony?
Yes, yes.
Were you involved in the beginning of that?
No, it had started. I think when I got the exam, we had one, but I think it was a one-off, and Sir Dowd and Locke presented us with our membership certificates, but I don't think it happened every time. But yes, by the time I became registrar, it was happening every time, and grew because the first one was in here. That's how few people were there. And by the time I stopped being registrar, it was just about filling the conference centre.
Yes.
It became very popular.
Yes.
It's a very good occasion.
Were you, and who was the secretary while you were?
John Anderton was secretary throughout that 7 years, because John had been registrar before I had.
Tell me about him.
I get down. One time he forgot to turn up for a meeting in the college, and everybody great running about and getting things organised. When Tony was present, Tony Toff was present at the time.
That was because he'd gone training for a marathon.
Yes, something like that. Yes. Well, we'd worked with John for many years, hadn't we? In the law firm, I said, known John obviously as long as I'd known yourself, we worked together then. It's amazing that the registrar and the secretary didn't meet all that often in the college. We met at council, just at council meetings really. Registrar really got on with working the examination office with the staff there.
Who were the staff you worked with?
Well, when I finished it was Lindy Tedford, who was very effective and very efficient. Before that, well, when I came, it was Frances Archibald, who left a year or two after I came.
Had she been in post a long time?
Yes, she'd been in post a long time. She ran it. Mm-hmm. And then I had a very nice lady called Kate Marshall,
right,
who was an absolute delight, but she moved on to another post. And her father was Sir Robert Lord Kirkpatrick. So I met him through his daughter. And he was a very genial person to meet in the college. So it was Frances Archibald, then Kate Marshall, and then Lindy Tedford for the last few years.
Right. Were there not problems, but was it sort of slightly tension-making when you got a new person in charge, or had a run-in period?
There was a run-in period, and I was never aware of any tension. I got on very well with the...
I don't mean tension in terms
No,
of...
I know. No, we got tense when the exam was on.
Yes.
And we tended to be here well into the evening when the exam was on, because all the papers had to be in and checked. And it's funny arithmetic, you see, it's not just normal. You've got to know the rules to add them up, because it's not an arithmetic calculation of the mark, the final mark. It's funny arithmetic. And
why is that?
It's why is that? Well, initially it was simply that if someone had a bare fail in one component, they had to have 2 marks more in another component in order to pass. But then it became more complicated, and now a little emphasis on the short case part of the clinical examination rather than the long case. They feel that the short case is the real important part, so there's discrimination there. And also to try to accommodate for when, something you brought up earlier, when 2 examiners don't quite agree or disagree by quite a bit, there are now formulae to determine what the final mark should be, so that they don't have to fight it out or disagree about it. There are formally to decide the final mark if examiners give different marks. So this had all to be checked very carefully.
Yes, because presumably one examiner believes the candidate to be awful, and the other one thinks is adequate. Does the system
there's a formula
allow for that?
Yeah, there's a formula to provide the final mark for that. Yeah.
Yes. Because I remember when I was 5 in the membership and the question was asked, then it became apparent that the questioner didn't know the answer himself and he was just trying out, and the other examiner had to help us out.
Yeah. Yes, I had a somewhat similar problem during I did a special subject, I did the Edinburgh second part, so I did renal physiology of medicine.
Yes, I did haematology.
Yes, and I was quizzed for quite a long time on the role of the chloride ion, which I'd always thought was just there to make up the number of negative ones.
You would have to... So, in a way, the registrar is a solitary position in the college.
Yes.
Yes. How did you find... You would attend council meetings during this time?
Yes, the registrar is answerable to council.
Yes.
And then the college at the quarterly meetings.
What was happening in the council during that time?
Oh, lots of things. I went through, I had 3 different presidents by being in for 7 years. So Michael Oliver was president, followed by John Richmond, followed by Tony Toft, as I was registrar. Right. All 3 very different, but all 3 making a very significant contribution.
What would you say, Michael Oliver, was a characteristics of Michael Oliver's presidency?
Michael was very good at keeping the college in the public eye and not letting the college in any way be pushed aside by the London College or by any other major organisation. Michael was a great man for fighting the corner for the college, nationally and internationally.
Yes.
I think that was one of his strengths.
Yes. He was less of an administrator, wasn't he?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, he saw himself more as a sort of the leading figure, and a role he filled very well.
Yes.
Very well.
And then John Richmond, what?
Well, he was back to a family man. John got the whole council and the whole college working very well for each other and with each other. John was toothy in his dealings with everyone, very, very, people very fond of him. people were very affectionate to John and Jane Richmond, and they responded to this. John got the best out of people by really being kind, encouraging, warm, and it was very much appreciated. Very effective in a totally different way from Michael Oliver. And of course, John had a much more in-depth knowledge of the workings of colleges, because John had, of course, as you know, been an office bearer in the London College too, so he knew the mechanisms.
It's interesting, isn't it, that John Richmond came from a tradition not unlike ours. He didn't work in 23 and 24, but he came from a family clinical background, whereas we came through family, and you know, for me the most important thing was recreating a family in the unit that I worked in. And whereas cardiology was less to the outsider. I don't know whether...
No, I'd agree with you. Yeah, sure.
And so then you moved on to Tony Todd.
Tony, yeah. Well, Tony was so young, but he did very well. Tony was bright and breezy and got a lot done. It's actually much more difficult to assess someone with whom you've been friends for many years. I've known Tony on the Collegiate Members Committee many years ago together. Tony was only 1-2 years behind me at medical school. And I think it was good. Breath of fresh air, young, worked well, helped develop closer links abroad, and put a lot of energy into it.
Yes.
A lot of dynamism about Tony's presidency, I thought.
What contacts were there with the London College? Did you have much contact with them?
Yeah, mainly through, well, the Part 1 and Part 2 board moved round. They meet in London, Edinburgh, Glasgow, and the board is composed of fellows from the 3 colleges, so that was always, we met 3 times a year for that. Yes, quite a few.
How many were on the boards?
Oh, it was quite a lot, because paediatrics were represented too. Most board meetings would be 12, 15 people there. Right.
What, with 3 or 4 from each college?
Yeah, thoroughly 3 and 1 paediatrician from each college. It would be, I think. And then the board chairman and secretary. And then representatives from the colleges, from the examination offices. Right.
Were you involved in the negotiations between the various colleges, and there's not more political?
No. Kept out of that. Or was kept out of that, I should perhaps say.
Yes. And now you are comfortably as a physician at the West End, and sort of not in the college. Is there anything else you want to tell us?
No, that's fine. Still support the college, I still think the college, but I've done 7 years as registrar. I think that was a reasonable commitment.
It's a long time.
Continue to teach in membership courses and examine in membership.
Yes.
Take an active interest in what's happening.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. It was enjoyable.